Let me tell you something that most people never admit out loud. Some children never really got the chance to be children. They learned to stay quiet when others argued. They learned to take care of people older than them. They learned that crying didn't fix things. It only made them seem weaker in a world that demanded strength long before they were ready to understand what that word even meant. If you've ever felt like you were forced to grow up too fast, you know this story already. It's written into the way you apologize too much, the way you overthink before speaking, the way you find yourself caring more about others' comfort than your own peace. You may not remember exactly when it started, only that one day you were laughing without worry, and the next you were carrying a weight no one could see. For some kids, childhood ends the moment they realize no one is coming to fix things. That's the moment they become their own parent, their own protector, their own emotional anchor. It's subtle at first, helping a parent calm down, comforting a sibling, solving problems adults should have handled. But over time it becomes identity, it becomes survival, and survival has a strange way of disguising itself as maturity. People tell you you're so responsible for your age. They call you strong, independent, wise beyond your years. But what they don't see is that those traits weren't choices. They were coping mechanisms. Every compliment hides a quiet ache, the longing to be carefree, to be silly, to be held instead of holding everything together. When you grow up too fast, you learn to scan every room for danger. Emotional danger, conflict, disapproval. You become hyper-aware of people's tones, their moods, their silences. You learn that peace is fragile and that your job is to maintain it. You become the fixer, the mediator, the emotional sponge. You soak up everyone's pain and rarely let your own show. And over time that becomes exhausting. You begin to confuse calm with safety, silence with love, and control with worth. Because as a child, control was the only thing that made you feel safe. You couldn't control your environment, so you tried to control yourself. Your words, your emotions, your needs. You became small, quiet, agreeable, not because you wanted to be, but because it felt like the only way to survive. You grew up watching others fall apart, and no one showed you that it was okay to fall apart too. So you learned to hold yourself together, no matter what. You learned to smile when things hurt. You learned to say, "I'm fine," when you weren't. And even now as an adult, that pattern follows you. You might find it hard to relax around others. You might over-explain, over-apologize, over-perform. You might find it almost impossible to rest, because rest feels unsafe. Stillness feels suspicious. Your nervous system never learned the difference between calm and danger. It learned that quiet moments are just a pause before something breaks again. And so you live on alert, even when nothing's wrong. That's what happens when you grow up too fast. Your body never learns that the storm is over. You might find yourself drawn to people who need saving. It feels familiar. That sense of being useful, being needed. It makes you feel like you have purpose. But deep down, it's also how you repeat your childhood story. The caretaker trying to heal everyone else while quietly craving to be healed yourself. And yet, you rarely let anyone take care of you. The idea of depending on someone feels uncomfortable. Love feels safer when you're the one giving it, not receiving it. Because to receive means to trust. And trust was never something you could afford to give easily. You might also notice that joy feels complicated. You laugh, but part of you feels guilty for it. You celebrate small things, but struggle to fully feel them. It's as if some part of you is waiting for it all to be taken away again. That's the residue of early responsibility. When happiness was always temporary, and safety was something you had to earn. And then there's the loneliness, not the kind you fix with company or conversation. It's deeper, the loneliness of someone who's always been emotionally self-sufficient. You can be surrounded by people, and still feel like you're holding something they'll never understand. Because how do you explain that you became an adult in a child's body? That your mind learned to manage, to protect, to predict, before it ever learned to just exist? Some nights, you feel it more strongly. that ache for a version of yourself that never got to be. The little kid who didn't have to be strong, who could have cried without shame, who could have made mistakes without fear of consequence. That child still lives inside you, waiting, hoping that one day you'll let them come out again. But the truth is, even if you've grown and healed and learned how to function, some part of that early loss always lingers. It shows up in your relationships, your perfectionism, your anxiety, your constant drive to be enough. You're not chasing success or validation. You're chasing safety. You're chasing the feeling of finally being able to exhale. When you grow up too fast, you don't just lose your childhood. You lose the freedom to be imperfect. Every mistake feels dangerous. Every failure feels personal. Every time you let someone down, it echoes through all those years of being the one who had to hold it together. And that's the most invisible part of it. People see your strength, but not the cost of it. They see your composure, but not the fatigue. They admire your independence, not realizing it was born from necessity, not choice. Growing up too fast teaches you how to function, but not how to feel safe while doing it. You become an expert at surviving, but a beginner at living. And when you finally enter adulthood, you notice that something's missing. A softness, a spontaneity, a sense of wonder. You can't always name it, but you feel it when others laugh easily, or trust effortlessly. You feel it when people seem carefree in ways that make no sense to you, because your brain never learned that safety doesn't always have to be earned. You start to realize that what you called maturity was actually hypervigilance. What you thought was strength was suppression, and what everyone praised as independence was really isolation disguised as competence. But even then, you don't blame anyone. You understand too much. You see why people acted the way they did. You empathize with everyone, maybe too much, because that's what growing up too fast does. It teaches you compassion, but it also teaches you silence. You see everyone's pain except your own, and yet, you can't unsee the truth forever. At some point, you start to feel that pull, the need to reconnect with what was lost, the need to feel joy without guilt, to rest without fear, to be loved without earning it. That's when the real journey begins, not toward becoming something new, but toward remembering what you were before you had to grow up so soon. Because the child you used to be is still waiting, and they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to come back. To understand the psychology of a child who grew up too fast, we have to start with one fundamental truth. No child becomes mature early by choice. It's not ambition that makes a child act like an adult. It's adaptation. It's what the human mind does when love becomes unpredictable or safety becomes conditional. Psychologically, this is often called parentification, when a child takes on emotional or practical responsibilities that belong to adults. But labels only explain the surface. Underneath, what's really happening is the brain learning one message too early. If I don't take care of everything, everything will fall apart. When that belief takes root, it becomes the architecture of a child's inner world. The nervous system begins to operate in constant alert. The mind becomes preoccupied with predicting moods, preventing conflict, and earning affection through performance. Even small children can sense tension they don't understand, and their instinct is to fix it. A healthy childhood is built on trust. Trust that adults can manage problems. Trust that the world won't collapse without your control. But when that trust breaks, the child's brain compensates by building control mechanisms. They start believing that love must be maintained through effort, and that peace only exists when they're good enough. That's how hyper-responsibility begins. You might see it in the child who never complains, who helps around the house without being asked, who comforts adults when they should be comforted. On the outside, it looks like maturity, but inside, it's fear. Fear that if they stop holding things together, they'll lose the little stability they have left. Neuroscience shows that chronic stress during early years changes how the brain develops. The amygdala, the part responsible for detecting threats, becomes overactive. The prefrontal cortex, which regulates emotion, adapts to constant vigilance. Over time, even in safe environments, that heightened alertness remains. The body doesn't forget what it had to do to survive. And this is why, as adults, these individuals often struggle with anxiety, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. Their nervous systems are trained to believe that calm is temporary, but comfort is earned, not given. They live with an invisible tension, always anticipating what might go wrong, always trying to stay one step ahead of chaos. Another layer to this psychology is the confusion between worth and usefulness. When a child's care, empathy, or obedience is rewarded, the brain pairs love with service. The message becomes, I'm valuable when I'm helping. I'm lovable when I'm useful. This belief doesn't fade with age. It matures into adult behavior. You see it in the friend who always listens but never opens up, the employee who overworks to avoid disappointing others, the partner who sacrifices their needs to maintain harmony. Underneath it all is the same emotional blueprint. If I stop being useful, I might stop being loved. There's also something deeply psychological about how these children handle emotion. When feelings were never safe to express, maybe because no one listened or emotions led to conflict, they learn to suppress rather than release. Anger turns into guilt. Sadness becomes numbness. Even happiness feels risky because it draws attention. So they flatten their emotions to stay invisible. This is called emotional inhibition, and it becomes a habit that shapes adult life. People who grew up too fast often describe feeling detached from their own feelings. They can describe emotions but rarely feel them fully. They intellectualize pain instead of experiencing it, because feeling it might open doors they spent years learning to keep shut. And then there's attachment. When childhood love was inconsistent, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, the child's brain learned to adapt through what psychologists call anxious attachment. That means constantly scanning for signs of withdrawal, rejection, or disappointment. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. The brain remembers instability and mistakes it for normalcy. That's why, as adults, they often oscillate between closeness and distance. They crave connection but fear dependency. They want to trust but anticipate betrayal. It's a push-pull dynamic that feels confusing, but it's really just a reenactment of old survival patterns. Every adult who grew up too fast carries two selves inside, the mature protector and the forgotten child. The protector handles life, pays bills, manages emotions, solves crises. The child, though, remains stuck in time, still waiting to feel safe enough to play. Most of the inner conflict in adulthood happens between these two parts. The protector says, we have to stay strong, while the child whispers, I just want to rest. And sometimes the protector wins for too long. That's when burnout happens, emotional exhaustion from constantly being the responsible one. The person starts to feel like life is something to manage, not experience. Even joy feels like another task. But here's the thing, even though these behaviors were born from pain, they're also evidence of resilience. A child who grows up too fast is a child who found a way to survive when they shouldn't have had to. Their empathy, their maturity, their awareness, these are incredible strengths. The problem isn't that they developed them. The problem is that they never learned how to turn them off. So what happens psychologically when they finally reach adulthood? They often experience what psychologists call delayed adolescence, not in the childish sense, but in the emotional one. Because they skipped parts of childhood, they enter adulthood with unmet needs resurfacing. They may start craving freedom, play, or exploration. They may rebel against routines they once followed perfectly. It's not regression, it's recovery. It's the psyche trying to reclaim what was lost. At the same time, they may also struggle with identity. When your sense of self was built around being who others needed you to be, it's hard to know who you are when no one's asking anything of you. You might find yourself uncomfortable with stillness, because stillness asks the question, who am I when I'm not fixing, helping, or managing? That's the silent crisis of those who grew up too fast, not knowing where duty ends and self begins. And yet, within that confusion, there's something profoundly human. Because even though early responsibility can leave deep imprints, it also cultivates rare qualities: empathy, insight, intuition. These people often grow into adults who can read emotion like a second language, who understand suffering deeply, who create safety for others, even when they've rarely felt it themselves. But understanding this psychology also means recognizing the cost. For every strength gained, something was sacrificed. The right to be carefree, the comfort of dependence, the belief that you don't have to earn your place in someone's heart. Those aren't small losses. They shape the very architecture of how a person relates to the world. And sometimes it's not until years later, in therapy, in relationships, or in quiet moments of reflection, that the realization hits. I was never meant to carry that much. That's where the healing begins, not with blame, but with acknowledgement. Acknowledging that what you thought was personality might have been protection, that what you called independence might have been loneliness, that your strength came from necessity, not nature. But the human mind is remarkable. What was once adaptation can become transformation. The same awareness that once protected you can now free you if you learn how to use it differently. Because there comes a point where surviving is no longer enough. The psyche, after years of endurance, begins to long for something deeper. Not control, not predictability, but peace. And peace only begins when you realize you don't have to earn it anymore. There's a quiet kind of suffering that follows the child who grew up too fast. It's not the kind of pain that screams. It's the kind that sighs in the middle of the night, when the world is asleep and the weight of being strong for too long presses down on your chest. It's the kind of pain that comes from realizing that you spent your childhood preparing for survival instead of living. You were supposed to be learning how to play, not how to cope. You were supposed to be asking for help, not giving it. But when life forced you to step into a role that wasn't meant for your age, you learned too early that love and safety sometimes come with conditions. So now, as an adult, you find yourself in strange emotional loops. You can't rest easily because rest feels undeserved. You can't cry easily because you learned long ago that tears don't fix anything. You crave love deeply, yet you push it away when it gets too close. You overthink small moments, replaying conversations, scanning for signs of rejection, because a part of you still believes that if you can just be good enough, you won't lose people again. This is the wound of early responsibility. It turns children into caretakers and adults into ghosts of themselves. And the saddest part is that many don't even realize they're still living by the same rules they made as kids to survive. Rules like, don't need too much, don't show weakness, always be okay. They were once shields, but now they're cages. The child who grew up too fast becomes the adult who can't relax into love. Because love to them isn't something soft. It's something they must earn. It's a performance, not a presence. Even in relationships, they often feel like outsiders, like they're watching life happen from behind glass. And when they do finally allow themselves to trust, it's fragile. One misunderstanding can trigger the old fear that everything stable can vanish in a moment. You see, growing up too fast doesn't just steal your childhood, it steals your sense of safety. And safety is the foundation of emotional freedom. Without it, you learn to live in survival mode. And survival mode is efficient but never peaceful. It gets things done, but it doesn't let you feel. So you become someone who looks fine, maybe even successful. You hold it all together, smile politely, and function almost perfectly. But inside, there's an exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes. It's the fatigue of always being on, the fatigue of constantly managing emotions, your own and others. The journey to healing this isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world asked you to grow up. The real you, the one who used to dream without fear, laugh without control, and believe without calculation, is still there, waiting underneath the layers of responsibility and restraint. Healing is about slowly unlearning the reflex of self-abandonment. It's about giving yourself permission to be small again, to rest, to need, to cry, to ask, to not know. It's strange how terrifying softness can be to those who grew up too fast. Vulnerability feels dangerous because, as children, it was. When you cried, no one came. When you asked, no one listened. When you failed, no one caught you. So your nervous system learned that vulnerability equals pain. But healing begins when you start gently teaching yourself that it's safe now, that you're no longer in the same house, or with the same people, or living under the same silence. The adult you is allowed to build a different reality. One where you are not constantly the parent, the protector, or the peacekeeper. One where you can say, I'm tired, and it's okay. One where love doesn't depend on perfection but presence. You will probably grieve, not just the childhood you lost, but the version of yourself that had to pretend to be older, stronger, wiser than they really were. You'll grieve the moments you missed because you were busy holding things together. You'll grieve the innocence you didn't get to have. But that grief is not weakness. It's a return. It's your soul reclaiming its own timeline. There's a powerful thing that happens when people who grew up too fast finally stop running from their inner child. They start listening to it. They start asking, what did you need back then? And sometimes the answers are so simple they hurt. I needed someone to tell me it wasn't my fault. I needed someone to stay. I needed someone to see me. And in those moments of realization, you can give yourself what no one else did. You can hold your younger self with compassion instead of criticism. The irony is the strength that once kept you alive now becomes the same strength that helps you heal. The endurance, the empathy, the emotional depth. They were born out of pain, but they can be used for peace. You already know how to survive. The real challenge now is learning how to live. And living means allowing imperfection. It means letting yourself rest even when things feel unfinished. It means learning to enjoy the present moment without feeling guilty for it. It means letting people help you without believing you're a burden. It means rediscovering joy in small silly things, because that's what your inner child always wanted. Joy without purpose, laughter without performance. One day, you'll realize that growing up too fast didn't break you. It shaped you. It gave you the ability to read emotions like music, to sense pain behind words, to love deeply and fiercely. But those same abilities need balance now. You don't need to be everyone's healer anymore. You don't have to fix every silence. You can finally step out of the role you were forced into and start being who you actually are. Healing doesn't mean you'll never feel the old ache again. Sometimes when you're tired or lonely, you'll still feel that old instinct to toughen up, to handle it all alone. But now you'll know that you have another choice. You can sit with yourself and say, it's okay. You don't have to be strong right now. That's what real maturity looks like. Not the kind you were forced into, but the kind you grow into with awareness and tenderness. The child who grew up too fast will always live somewhere inside you. But over time, they'll stop running. They'll stop watching the door, waiting for someone who never came. Because you'll have become the one who finally showed up. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not erasing the past, but giving it new meaning. It's when you stop trying to outrun your younger self and start walking beside them instead. It's when you finally feel safe enough to set down the armor, to breathe without bracing, to live without apologizing. The world might never know the weight you carried or the nights you spent being your own protector, but you will. And that quiet knowing that you made it, that you're still here, that you're learning to be soft again, is proof of something miraculous. That even after being forced to grow up too soon, it's never too late to grow up again, this time in your own way. Because healing isn't about becoming strong, you already are. Healing is about feeling safe enough to be gentle again. And maybe, just maybe, that's what growing up was always meant to be.